What's going on, guys? Welcome to In the Zone. I'm your host, Garrison Roy, and today we're going to have a very unique episode. But if you're new to the podcast, we'll have rants, we'll have full-length interviews like today, mental minutes to help with, just quick little mental game hacks to help elevate your performance, either as a player or a coach, and then also deep dive educational explorations to get into small little skill acquisitions or intricacies of the game, which I'm sure we'll get into a little bit today. Um, but if you guys have any other future topics or even guest suggestions, the DMs, emails, always open for you guys to hit it up and always willing to talk some shop. But without further ado, we got Gabriel Pilla from the Yard. He's the director of performance there. And then we also have SJ Mousseau. You're still at Erskine, right? The pitching director there.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's where I'm
Cool.
currently
Awesome.
at.
No, yeah, it's gonna be good. We got two visitors in here, so it's gonna be a lot of back and forth conversation. So we'll let it ride from there. But
Sure.
yeah, we obviously, if any of you guys follow us on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it now, you guys were thinking about doing a podcast, and I was extending the invite out. I was like, hey, let's get you guys on and talk a little bit about whatever's on your mind and get some things rolling.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's kind of funny how that started because SJ just DM'd me one day and was like, "Hey man, like you want to just like talk on the phone sometime, catch up." And then I mean, we spent like an hours just pretty naturally just talking. So and then you reached out on social media and it just all worked out pretty perfectly, honestly.
Yeah, love it. Love it. Um, so what has been on your guys' mind lately? I mean, obviously you guys are coaching, and then over being at Erskine, SJ, kind of helping guys transition into the end season. Gabe, with you being kind of on the weight room side at the Yard, right?
Mhm.
But you're kind of seeing that same transition happen. What's some things that you guys are kind of consistently seeing across the board as guys are getting ready for games?
You want to go first, Gabe, or should I?
For sure, for sure. So I have like more high school guys, and we have wide range of athletes, really high level athletes, all the way down to like really youth level athletes. So right now, like Minnesota baseball starts up in April, I want to say. So
Oh,
we're starting to transition to like live AB type situations. So I think we have March left of that on the throwing side. But in the weight room side, it's just a lot of like things that when I stepped into this role right away, as you notice, is that a lot of youth athletes just need like that building blocks of like the different levels of skill and the requirements for the sport. So like one of the things that you'll I've been helping them with is like a lot of athletes don't have like the movement qualities or the movement solutions in a lot of degrees in the weight room. So it's like learning the base level movement patterns. How can we backwards track that so it's not too challenging for them? And then also just giving them qualities and skills they need, things like rotation, lateral flexion, being able to create like hip hinges and just like hip flexion in general. So, um, and a lot of it too has just been like, it's not, doesn't have to be like a perfect, like linear periodized program because I think the thing I realized right away when I got here is like the kids don't know like how good the programming is, whether it was me or whether it was like my boss Mitch, like who was programming. They just know like, hey, this is either fun or this isn't. So like, kind of like giving them their medicine without like them even realizing it's medicine has kind of been my biggest thing since I kind of stepped into this role, and like giving them a ton of qualities while still like making the weight room fun for them is kind of where we've been at. So that's training things like power, training things like strength, stability, rotation, all those qualities they need, in just like a really fun manner for them.
I love that fun piece that you added there too, because a lot of people associate the weight room with like being sore,
Mhm.
grinding through it. But if you honestly kind of, especially for the younger kids, you gamify it a little bit, right? Or have some
Exactly.
competitions in there,
Yeah,
like it's going to make it way better for them.
exactly. And the first thing like we did was just like changing up the warm-ups and like you said, like adding games, and their focus level increased right away, like the second they did that. So it's just creating the environment where it's like it's fun. Like, yes, some of the lifts are still hard, like sprinkling, and like I said, some of that medicine where it's like it's challenging, but then you can kind of like talk to the kids a little bit. Like one of them was like, that lift was really hard. I was like, okay, what was hard? He was like, the eccentric hamstring sliders. So I was like, okay, so one lift out of or one block or movement out of the entire lift. He's like, yeah, I guess so. I'm like, well, that's pretty good then. I think if it's six movements and one of them is really hard, like I can live with that personally, so
Sure. Yeah. Well, and most guys are usually weak in their posterior chain anyway. So
exactly.
SJ, what about you, my man? Obviously, you're kind of more on the college side, and how are you seeing guys kind of transition into things?
No, yeah, like good question. I actually came to Erskine at a very, very unique time. Like my very first day on the job was the day before opening day for the varsity squad. So
Wow.
because I'm the director of pitching development, I've been dealing with not only the varsity pitchers but also JV pitchers, and JV has like 100 guys on the roster, so like roughly around 40 pitchers. So
Hmm.
that's like close to, I'd like to say, number close to my head would be around 20 arms, or I mean not 20 arms, 60 arms, 20 on varsity, uh 40 on JV. So like kind of just viewing their progress, still getting to know them. I'm still learning names, to tell you the truth. Still,
Sure.
still kind of just seeing like where they're at. So the biggest adjustment I've been making is like making in-season adjustments, trying to go, not trying to start from phase one, getting them ready for more season than anything, but like we can still make adjustments. Like
Yeah.
as you know, as you probably know, I recently came off my 6 month internship at Driveline Baseball, and I've learned. I cannot tell you how much I learned there. The information was unbelievable, but I think just taking like those small little bits and pieces, starting from like phase one, it's like, all right, what do you see in the throw? Like, is it just simply how far they are away from the plyo wall, or how they approach the drill? Just taking little things like that and making those small little adjustments. Because I mean, at the end of the day, like when it comes to athlete development, like you really, on the throwing side, you really kind of just have to look like, all right, are they doing the basics right?
Hmm.
Like, can they do the basics right, or until like we make the big adjustments, or do we have to make a big adjustment just like that? And I think just even giving them the basics, like giving them a target to throw to on the plyo wall, giving them a purpose and they're throwing every day, and making sure they're standing far enough away from the plyo wall has made a huge difference, at least so far. From my third week. This is my third week here, so
Sure. Yeah.
just in
Well, and
my short
that's
time.
oh, I love that, man. Because like you can't do a complete overhaul on a guy, especially whenever he's getting ready to go into game situations, because then he's just going to be super domed. Like he's just going to be all too much up here
Yeah.
trying to figure out where his body is, too intrinsically focused, and just not a good recipe, right? But yeah,
No,
like simple
yeah,
things like
because
that.
you have to get them ready to compete. Yeah,
Exactly.
you have to get
That's
them
got
ready
to
to
keep the
like
main
compete.
thing the main thing. That's it.
Exactly.
I love it. And yeah, like little adjustments, like you were saying, like even if they don't notice that they're doing it, whether it's you just changing their position or throwing a target in there, or, for example, like um, Gabe, you were talking about putting medicine in for guys to try to just have them, have something where they don't even really know about it. You're technically, as a coach, kind of zooming out, you're setting up constraints to afford them to do a certain movement pattern or to afford them
Absolutely.
to, hit a target and keep something kind of a little bit more, I guess, best way to put it would be it's getting a little bit closer to game like as possible as far as like the plyos are concerned, right? Like you're trying to add in some variables to make it a little bit more representative of what they're going to be doing in game.
Yeah,
Or,
exactly.
I've
Right.
seen countless amount of times guys are too close to the wall, they cut the crap out of it, all that
Yeah.
good stuff. So
Hmm.
it's good to also know, like as a coach, you're influencing, because a lot of people think they need to focus a whole lot on like how they're doing a drill or how they're doing a certain movement, which is true, but also setting up the environment can do a lot more for that as well.
Absolutely. I think the environment for a lot of ways for me is like really everything. It's like it's human beings, like we, pretty much we're products of our environments. Obviously, there's a couple other factors, but if the environment's going to dictate how they perform or what they do, like then the environment needs to actually like guide them in that direction. So it has to suggest things subconsciously and consciously to them, like absolutely. So
Yeah. And there's some certain things too. I'm not sure what your guys' view is on this. I talked about this in some previous episodes where you want to set up constraints to afford a movement and not constrain to constrain, right? And everyone knows and they've seen these videos of forget the guy's name, but it's overhead athletic guy, the physical
Mhm.
therapist, who has like so many like noodles and constraints and everything
Sure.
just everywhere. And again, it's like a very extreme example. And I had Rob Blanc, my business partner, had a conversation with him. He's like, "Oh, well, all these constraints were affording a better movement. We were trying to compress everything in a short amount of time." And I'm like, "Yeah, but is that
Yep.
going to really translate when you get up on the mound in a game? Like,
Yeah.
it's hard for me to believe that, you know?" So
Yeah.
it's trying to make sure that your constraints are letting them figure out how to do things versus almost kind of putting them in a box, if that makes sense.
Yep. Absolutely. Me and my boss, Mitch Brown, had a conversation kind of about that too. And because we were talking about less, kind of flashy version of that, but something like the drop step, where it's like really the
Mm,
drop step is manipulating the movement into pelvis rotation. A lot of ways athletes don't have to think about that, but like, yes, they are rotating the pelvis now because of the drop step, but are they doing it because the drill is dictating it, or because they're actually able to do it? And probably more so that the drill is dictating it. I think it still has value within doing that, but then also it's the coach's responsibility to understand, like, okay, just because it looks like they're doing it doesn't mean they have that ability then to go on the mound and then actually do that. So like, again, being able to like backwards track from there too. So
sure. Well, and you're compressing time, so you're also helping a lot of
exactly.
guys move a little bit faster. Like, yeah, I think each drill has an inherent strength and an inherent weakness, right? Like
Exactly.
one thing's going to be more emphasized here than, maybe a roll in or a step back versus a drop step. Or back in my day, we called it like a quick pick, like a pick off
Yeah.
to try to emphasize, like, fast movement, whatever you call it, right? Like it's essentially doing the same thing as like, hey, are you compressing time? Are you adding in some type of, you know, external constraint where they're having to move or maybe feel something out, right? And it all really depends on the goal. I'm
Yep.
sure SJ, whenever you're over there talking to guys in the plyo wall, you're like, hey, what are you trying to do right here? Like what's going
Oh
through?
yeah. Oh, 100%. And I mean, I'm just gonna say this real fast, just like so I'm not like downgrading our current pitching coach. Current pitching coach, smart guy, awesome guy. And he was just telling me like in the phone interview originally, he's like, listen, like I teach him driveline. I don't really know what the hell I'm doing. So, I need your help, man. Like when I got hired and my very first day, he taught him all rockers. And I mean, I'll tell you the truth, rockers are my least favorite drill ever. I think it's just
Same.
because a lot of guys are just trash at them more than anything. But I do believe they can serve a purpose if done right. And I asked him like, oh, why'd you teach them all rockers? He's like, I like him just because it gets the arm up. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, yeah, I can see your point coming from there. But like, I'm a big fan of like a pelvis open rocker more than anything. If our goal is to get the arm up, that way we already have like kind of. I'm not sure if it's coming from a constraint movement or anything, but like we already have a piece of the kinetic chain solved in a way. The pelvis is already open. Now we can get the torso engaged and get the arm flipped up. That was kind of like the biggest adjustment. Like I didn't really change a whole lot of guys' drill selections. I just simply just try to make their drills better more than anything, if that makes sense.
Oh, sure. And I could see that and why I don't necessarily really give guys rockers, especially younger kids, because they don't really have the pelvic awareness of what they're doing.
No,
So it's a knee bend rocker, if that makes sense. They're like, gonna bend into this knee, then bend into this knee, and then they extend out.
no, yeah.
All right, yeah, that's not the pattern we're looking for, you know.
No, yeah, but like, I mean, these are also like a little more advanced athletes than the high school kid. Like, that's like,
Sure.
I think the main reason why Erskine has a varsity team and JV team. Like, we have like 10 guys who could pop a nine any day. So it's just like these are like a little more advanced athletes. And it kind of goes back to like, kind of like the type of athletes we were talking about earlier. Just, it's like, all right, I mean, this is how we did it at Driveline, and I don't want to give too much away because they'll get pissed at me for it. But but we based everything off a pyramid, and the bottom pyramid is just like the controllables, like how well you're eating, how well we're
Sure.
recovering, how well we are doing the weight room, how well can we move, and then we can focus on the throwing side, more than anything. And I think with that being said, they covered a good amount of the pyramids. Just like, all right, they're eating right, they are, attacking the weight room hard because I mean, I watch them lift, regularly and they attack the weight room pretty hard, even the JV guys. So with that being said, it's like, all right, they're doing that. So now we can get a little more specific on throwing and make sure they can make those minor adjustments a lot faster, especially in season too.
Oh, absolutely. You got to have some of those foundational building blocks. Like I remember in one facility that I used to work at, we had a kid who came in and he was trying to pull down. And he's like, why is my velo down like 3, 4 miles an hour? I was like, I don't know, man. I mean, you're looking kind of sluggish. What'd you eat today? It's like, well, I had like a protein shake and then some crackers and then went to school. And then I came here. I'm like, dude, you're missing the whole point, man. Like you're not even fueled up. So of course you didn't have a good velo
Yeah.
day.
And that part is like
Yeah.
the
I'm
youth
actually
athletes.
gonna,
Oh no, sorry. Go ahead.
oh, no, I was gonna add, like, I had a very similar incident where, like we had this one kid at Driveline who, sorry about that, Gabe, by the way. But anyway,
You're
so
good.
we had we had this one incident at Driveline. Well, not incident, but we had this one athlete at Driveline show up once a week. Live 2 hours away in Washington. I mean, of course, you're gonna show up once a week for a velo day,
Yeah.
and his velo constantly went down. Constantly went down. Like, he was a very good athlete, very strong for a high school kid. Threw very hard. Was going through a velo phase. Like, I think 2 weeks in a row was pull down. 1 week was mountain velo, and his velo constantly went down, and he was constantly pissed off. And I mean, I'm not sure how you guys feel about the pulse product, but like, we looked at his pulse stats after. He's like, dude, I feel like I've been recovering well. This is this. I'm like, dude, you've been blowing out your B days. I can tell that on your pulse. So like, taking advantage of the controllables, like, even goes into the throwing days. It's like, treat a B day as a B day, or treat like the medium days as a medium days.
Hmm.
Or I'm not really sure how you actually program on the throwing side. Understand the lifting side because it's great content, but like, I think just taking those days as those days is, I mean, I'm guilty of this in my own career. Like, me, throwing very, very slow in high school, trying any way to get throwing harder. I went hard every day, but
Oh,
like, the
I was
best,
guilty of that
best
myself.
way to,
Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely.
the best way, the best way to gain velo is simply controlling the controllables. Like, you're putting yourself in the best position to do so.
Yeah.
And I mean, it sounds common sense nowadays, but it's like, it amazes me that a lot of people still struggle with that more than anything.
Oh,
It
100%.
it yeah, and it's like, I mean, I just had a conversation I think 2 nights ago with a couple athletes talking about that, where it's like they're not lifting here and they made their own lifting and they're doing 5 days per week and they've been doing the same block for 2 months, but it's like a ton of volume and it's like, okay, like you are creating this much stress at school, right? Like it's really stressful. Now you're throwing and you're creating this much stress and you're lifting and you're creating this much stress. Like, where's the time that you're actually taking to like recover and stuff like that? I think a lot of athletes aren't educated on, like, because sounds like all three of us were like, hey, we're going, 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 like, which is great. Like, you need to be able to like hit the gas really hard, but you also have to hit the brakes just as hard. And I think a lot of athletes just
Sure.
aren't educated on like how the process of like we stress ourselves, then we recover, or we go up and then we go down, or like how do you actually, like, you have to look at that lens through the long term, not just like I want to throw 85 next week, and things like that. And I mean, me and my roommate at when I interned at Tread had conversations about that. He had a 2 mile per hour PR, and like his trainer was phenomenal, like peaked him perfectly, did all that stuff right. But like we would go home at night and we would talk about like, hey man, like you don't need to do all the extra fluff work. Just do the things you need to do really, really, really good. And like, he was like, yeah, like one day I realized, like, yeah, spending like 30 extra minutes foam rolling is just like not doing anything for me. It's just like
Yeah,
extra
that's
stuff
probably not
that's
the
just like,
best.
I don't have like, I don't need to spend my mental capacity on it. Like I only have so much bandwidth. Like, why waste all of it? So, and then he jumped up from like low 90s, touching 94.9 in his last pro day up to 96.8 or something. So it's just like, do the big things really, really well. And then like, if there's other things, you can fill in the gaps as you need. And a lot of athletes just don't get that. So
Oh, absolutely.
Oh yeah,
And
I'm glad you mentioned that, Gabe.
return on training time is huge, right? Like, and I think if anybody could get anything out of this podcast is like, hey, make sure that you're keeping the main thing the main thing. Don't feel like you're getting too lost in the sauce, so to speak, right? Like foam
absolutely.
rolling or I mean, even though we probably both all program them, like, hey, don't get lost in the plyos, like, especially when you're in
Exactly.
season, you got to get up on the mound at some point, right? Or,
Exactly.
throw to a catcher,
Right.
have a
Yeah.
hitter stand in the box, right? You got to be able to make that shift and not get too caught up in the, I don't want to say the little things because they're not really that little, but it's more of like the small things that help build you up too,
Yeah.
I think.
It's the things that actually move the needle forward. And like
Correct.
to your point, because you just said like plyos, like anything can become poison very quickly. Like if I
Sure.
spend too much time doing plyos and I'm not actually throwing what I need to, throw, which is the 5 ounce baseball enough, or I'm spending so much time in the weight room that I'm, burning myself out, like it becomes poison real quick too.
Oh
100%.
yeah. Mind if I add on that as well?
Yeah, go for it.
No, yeah, like I mean, I'm glad you mentioned that, like how plyos can eventually be poison. Like a lot of people who don't know anything about plyos, they ask me like, do plyos actually get me better? And in my head, I'm like, you're asking me this question, but like I think plyos are very similar to the weight room. Like I've heard this one quote from Coach Feld from University of Miami, football strength coach, the one with the really cool mustache. But anyway, so he said like the weight room is, the best way to accelerate your career, but it's also the quickest way to end your career. And I think plyos are the exact same way. Quite honestly, like if you approach them right, if you approach it, with respect, if you approach it with conviction or not conviction, I mean, it's early, it's
Oh,
early.
yeah.
But if you approach them the right way, bottom line, you're gonna get out of it. You're gonna get out of it, and that's why you should have someone. You got to make sure you're doing them right more than anything. That
Mhm.
way, you can see the benefits from it more than anything.
Absolutely. You got to have the right intention behind why you're doing it. And to answer your question, SJ, like I kind of, again, I've said this on other episodes too, for those of you who are listening, but I kind of treat everyone a little bit differently. Like I'm not going to have everyone do plyos. And there's one kid who I currently coach right now, never picked up a plyo ball in his life. So I'm like, cool, we're not going to start now. We'll keep doing the same thing. We'll still do the similar drills, throwing baseballs. We might pick up a 5 ounce plyo as he ages and gets a little bit better. Maybe we'll start to ramp that out up a little bit, right? But as of right now, it's like, hey, like I'm also not trying to fit you into this box where you have to throw, all these plyos and stuff like that, right? Like, and especially whenever they're getting ready to be in season, that's probably the last time you want to introduce something that's going to develop a huge shock to their system, if that makes sense. But, if there's another guy who's been throwing them for, most of his career, yeah, for sure. I'm going to program those, right? Because he's used to doing them and he already has a capacity built up to where he can handle the additional throws, the, you know, stresses that whatever might be bringing, whether it's heavy days on medium ones or, hey, like I'm used to throwing the gray plyo here and there for days whenever you're feeling good or whenever you're getting ramped up to try to get the arm moving faster. Awesome. Totally for it. Right. But I think it's good to kind of, we all have these, I guess, boxes or templates in our head as coaches, right? Like we're like, okay, hey, you're gonna fit this box, you're gonna go here. But it's good to kind of also think outside of those boxes and be like, okay, hey, this guy's not really even in any box. You might have to create another box for him in a weird sense.
Mhm. Yeah, the templates, need to be able to have some structure because I mean, like I'm sure you guys know, like programming with templates is significantly easier than not programming with templates. But if you are, victim to them and that's all you have, then like you're just leaving so much on the chopping block for the athletes too, and you have to be able to have the freedom to express other parts of it. Absolutely.
Yeah. That's the big thing
Oh yeah,
too.
I agree. I agree with that secondhand.
Yeah. SJ, would you say like for some guys, like right now, it's like, hey, maybe doing more stuff on plyos or whatever if they're not eating the nutrition like we talked about or mentioned before, not sleeping enough, like that's probably the one thing you want to really focus on and measure. The rest of the stuff's just kind of icing on the cake, right?
Oh yeah, 100%, 100%. Especially like in this stage in the college year, like where you're in season, you're battling, you're juggling classes, you're juggling practice, you're juggling, all this stuff. And I mean, that's where like the whole mental side comes in. Like, I don't want to dome up too much. I just want to make sure right now they're doing at least a basic pivot pick right. Is if we can get that down, then like in my head, it's like, all right, we're on a good spot. Like one step at a time. It's like let's get better at the pivot pick first, then we can move on to the bigger stuff. Let's you know keep it simple at that point. That's
Sure.
like my biggest approach right now. And it also depends on the athlete. Like a lot of those JV arms, like yesterday, I watch them throw. I actually called pitches for the first time. Little fun fact, just because.
There you
I
go.
mean, why not have a little fun, But I I think most of those guys, quite honestly, just simply just need to get bigger, stronger. But at the same time, me on the throwing side, I gotta help them get better at throwing. So make sure they're doing a pivot pick right has been the big thing more than anything, and that has helped them. I believe it's helped them a lot. They said they're feeling good from it. So
It's good. Yeah, and if you, as long as their performance is getting better, that's all that matters, right? If they're performing better on the
yeah,
field, then we're doing something right. If it's going backwards, then
exactly,
we have to kind of reconvene and reset what we actually are focusing on, right? Hit the little reset
exactly.
in our head. To kind of like go off a little bit from that, right? We're talking a little bit about the recovery side, the nutrition side, some of those foundational building blocks. What are some things that you guys have seen for the guys that you've worked with, maybe that whether that's weight room building blocks or maybe even just little things that guys may have misconceptions on, or maybe something that you're constantly hearing yourself repeat over and over again?
Oh, honestly, for me personally, I look at like nutrition as like there's not a lot of misconceptions, but there's an absurd amount of misinformation out there.
Mm. Yeah.
And like information, so I put on my story last night a video of, I don't want to say any names because I don't like, doing that, but basically saying things of like this food is going to increase your insulin this much if you blend it or whatever, like just stuff that like quite honestly like just doesn't matter, like it really just doesn't matter. And a kid DMs me, he's like, man, like I'm so sick of this stuff, like I just don't know what to eat anymore. And I'm like, it's a real problem in my opinion. Like it has become so like nutrition wise of like, okay, how much do I need to eat? Do calories even do anything? Like carnivore, keto, fasting, like for whether you want to lose weight or gain weight or retain muscle, it's like there's so much like density and saturation of information. Like it's just like we talk about the big things versus the little things. Like probably the best, like, and I'm not like a nutrition person at all, but just someone who's like struggled with weight mightily. Like I was 6 years ago, I was 250 pounds, 30% body fat, like,
Oh.
and I worked with like, yeah, no, I was big. Like, but like I looked into it a lot. I wanted to learn, but like just doing the big things really well. Like what do the calories look like? Are you hitting enough protein per day? Are you
Mhm.
eating like 3 servings of fruits and vegetables per day? And the rest after that kind of falls to the wayside, like, so it becomes less about like the actual food selection and like this food's gonna give me inflammation and this food won't, and more of just like, are you doing the things that actually move the needle forward more? And like you can get more specific off of things like that. So I'd say that that's for me like the lack of like so much information and misinformation, it kind of like creates a ton of misconceptions for me.
Oh, absolutely. I think BioLane is a really good one that kind of calls out a lot of
I
people.
yeah, I love Bio Lane.
Yeah.
He's
And
great,
he
but
was, I think he was talking about like, hey, if anyone that you're listening to or whatever that you can call out, it's like, are they using the words like best, worst,
yeah,
always, like having some type of like, you know, the word that I'm probably trying to look for is, are they speaking in absolutes, right?
yes,
Like that's probably a hard red flag, whether that's
hmm
nutrition, whether that's baseball training, whether that's, whatever it is. And that's,
hmm
there's a lot of gray area whenever we coach and trying to find, hey, what's the right thing for that athlete, like SJ mentioned earlier, right? Like we have to find what works. And that's essentially kind of my coaching philosophy. Is like, hey, what works, what gets you better on the field, that's what we're going to do.
Yeah,
Essentially.
absolutely.
Where you're going to have, you need to have some trial and error and
Mhm.
try some things out. And, um, you need to experiment, but at the same time, you don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole and, think that everything's good or everything's bad, or, plyo balls are bad, or, whatever it might be, right?
Because it always depends. And that's the, like, especially on social media, like that's the thing nobody wants to say, is that we probably know less than we think we know, and that we probably don't realize how much one thing weighs compared to another. Because like the plyo ball again is like, how many athletes get plyo balls and like get better from them because it's a new movement solution they just got. It's new variability. It's a new stimulus altogether. Like,
Sure.
like
Novice gains. Yeah,
versus
for sure.
exactly, so, and a lot of those things we just don't know, like simply we just don't.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Well, Gabe, I saw one post that you had recently where you were talking about death to ice baths. Let's talk about that for a
Yes. um
Oh
so
boy.
I Little context. So gosh, almost 2 years ago now, I was in a big like David Goggins type phase, like doing something like hard every day. And I loved ice baths, so I built my own. But I think when I look back from more of a neutral lens, ice baths might work. They probably elicit some inflammation, reaction. They probably help a little bit with recovery. Um, but again, like that one study I quoted where they were talking about like you do this after a lift and you're probably going to have less muscle protein synthesis because of, the inflammation is the body's natural way of like, helping repair things.
Yeah.
I think a lot of athletes get in. What I've seen is that they'll go in and they'll do what I was doing, where it's like, okay, I want to get mentally stronger. So I'm going to go ice bath, which, look, if that's what you need to do from the start, that's great. Like if that's going to move the needle forward or just get you off the blocks, great. But I think we also have to realize is like eventually like ice baths are not going to make you throw 95. If they help, they are minimally helping. And they are a stimulus that you have to recover from all the time. So if you are ice bathing for 2 minutes every day, like it might not, like you do that for a week and you might be okay. And you do it for a month and a year, and like either you will adapt or you won't. But the point being is that like that is still a stimulus you're going to have to recover from on the back end somehow, some way. So that's kind of why I personally just, does it move the needle forward enough for me to actually sit here and say like, yeah, ice baths are worth it? Absolutely not.
Mhm.
Absolutely not.
Was that study on full like global icing, or was that localized icing?
I think it was water submersion.
Okay.
So yeah.
Just out of curiosity, I
Um
suppose. Because I've
yeah.
seen studies where it was like, hey, like local. And I've always been anti like local icing. You see the kids with the
Yeah.
ice packs and everything. I'm like, that's the last thing you want to do. Like you said,
Mm-hmm.
inflammation is the response to try to get rid of, I
Mm-hmm.
kind of dumb it down for some kids and say, hey, like this is, you need to get the bad blood out and get new blood cells back in to help with that recovery process.
Yeah.
Putting ice on it slows down that process. So you're kind of putting your recovery on hold when you ice
Yeah.
your arm.
And I think that's the thing, man, is like we got into, rabbit hole discussions, debates about that. And, I tried to go through and I tried to put my biases away. It was hard, but I tried to find as much information and meta-analysis about like ice baths as I could. And for every single one you found that endorsed it, there was another one that said, oh, it just probably doesn't do as much as we think it does. And I think that's kind of the point, is like the data is so conflicting. Like it probably works, but it's probably not worth it either to me. Like it's
Sure.
probably just not worth the return on investment.
Yeah. I mean, you don't want to go
Oh, yeah.
buy 7 grand, whatever,
Exactly.
that polar plunge. Probably, I mean, if you're doing it every single day and you feel like it's helping you jumpstart your day, if that's the something that you just keep in your routine, like sure, maybe. I mean,
Yeah, exactly. Like if that's what you need, like great. But again, it's that discussion. Like, but when's the point that it starts to become poison and now it's I can't function without one, or I don't feel as good without one, you know, because I read this in a book. I can't remember what book it was, but it was when I was at Driveline. Um, you know, the body adapts and or it learns to not adapt basically, whereas like you start doing ice baths and the body says, oh, I'm going to get my recovery from other ways, which is the ice bath, so it stops recovering as well, you know. So I don't remember what that book's name is. I could find it, but
Sounds like the
I thought that
said
was
principle in
interesting too.
essence, though, right?
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
adaptations to impose demands, like that kind of sums up what you're talking about. People can probably
Exactly.
talk about it or mention about it in various ways, but yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And I guess that was probably a big thing too for poisons, literally, I guess, is like NSAIDs, right? If guys are just pounding ibuprofen and stuff like that before they even
Hmm.
throw, how do you even know if your arm feels good if you can't feel it?
Exactly. Exactly. It's
Yeah.
like if a patient who has incredible back pain, like I remember hearing, you guys know, like Dr. Mike on YouTube or whatever, like he would talk about if a patient is addicted to opioids and he's in back pain, the first step to getting rid of the back pain is actually to get him off the opioids, you know?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I'm glad you
So,
mentioned that too. I'm actually glad you mentioned that because like I had, I have throughout my time growing up, I had two bad ankles. Like I was a
mhm,
injury prone to like spraining my ankle. And the biggest thing I thought, at least when I was like in my early college years, was to wear an ankle brace. And I
mhm,
realized what's going to help my ankles. Oh, wait, I got to get rid of the brace. And in my head, I'm like, what? That's going to set me up for, I'm going to break my ankles. But
yeah,
in all reality, it was the best decision for me. Like, I remember
yeah,
I was against at first, but I mean, Frank, I'll recommend that to anybody now.
exactly.
Yeah.
You know, the body
Funny how
No,
it
responds to
it's
works.
what we
not.
ask of it to.
Oh, absolutely. And again, that's not something where, again, I don't want to pigeonhole myself and say taking insulin is bad altogether. Like
No,
if you
no,
use them at the right time when you need them, they're gonna work,
Yeah.
right? When
yes,
you actually have some pain or soreness or tenderness, right? Like, yeah, throw them in there. But also, there are studies, if you want to kind of get in the whole meta-analysis thing, there are studies that say that actually makes your tendons weaker.
yeah,
So,
not,
if you take them
yeah,
over a long period of time, that's definitely going to be detrimental.
yeah. I remember
Quality
my
over
friend was like,
quantity.
yeah, like it's all that. It's dosage makes the poison. When do I use it? And like, because I that study was interesting too, because my like three years ago now, my buddy was like, maybe four. He was like, oh yeah, I just read a study that said ibuprofen actually reduces muscle protein synthesis. So like, it's like to the point you said earlier, like there's pros and cons to everything, and it's like, do the
Yeah.
pros outweigh the cons, and how long am I gonna do it for? You know?
Yeah.
Well,
And
yeah, like
just
you
for that,
mentioned that too. Oh, sorry about that.
no,
No,
you're
yeah,
good.
you mentioned that too. It's like if you think about it, too much of anything is bad. Like if you drink too much water, you're likely going to drown.
Yeah,
But like you
yeah,
cannot survive without water.
Hmm.
So
exactly.
like at the end of the day, you just gotta be smart with everything. At that point,
Hmm.
gotta learn how to
100%.
use it the right way more than
There's a right
anything.
dosage for everything, right? Or even if you do
Absolutely.
drink a lot of water throughout the day, okay, what's the electrolytes like? Because you could still be
Exactly.
going too far on the other side there. And it's a balance. And you got to kind of, even as an individual, right? Like you got to figure out what works for you. Or, some people like to have
Exactly.
a lot of water and then maybe a little bit of electrolytes, or some guys like to have electrolytes or like the little Mio things that they put in their water the
Mhm.
entire time. Like or I even suggested some guys be like, hey, one inning you drink water, the next half inning when you come back in, you drink some type of electrolyte Gatorade or whatever, right? So then that way you're kind of mixing it up and not drinking all water. Because I had a pretty bad
Yeah.
experience one time in summer ball where I just cramped up so bad. It was like all sprawled out and in the heat, probably 105 index, right? Because I just didn't have any of those electrolytes in. So I was throwing salt tablets in, but I was drinking water and I didn't replace it with the electrolytes. And I was like, look, you
Yeah.
got to get those in, or you're almost as bad as not drinking water.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
So,
think the best cure in it. Like here's the thing. Here's the craziest thing is I don't get sick very often. Like I don't know how. I just don't get the cold. I really don't get. I don't get the flu or anything. And then it's funny because like when I do get sick, the very first thing I do is make sure I get my electrolytes in. Next thing you know, I've recovered just like that. Like, I don't know. I wish there was an exact science behind this. I wish we had more studies about this, but it's like it's funny how as little as electrolytes can make a big difference to
Sure.
recovery.
Oh
So
yeah. Well, and then dehydration too, especially nowadays for
yeah.
really both of our weather conditions right now. I mean, SJ, I mean, we're kind of warmer than Minnesota a little bit, but
A
you
little
do
chilly.
No, yeah.
sweat. You still sweat the same amount. You just don't realize it whenever it's really cold outside. And I feel like it's easier for guys to get dehydrated in the winter
Yeah.
versus summer whenever they can actually see how much they're sweating.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely a thing. When I was in middle school, we went up to a basically like up north for a week or something like that, and it's freezing cold up there. You have to have like all the proper weather stuff and like all that stuff. But they said like, okay, like it's so cold, like you're not going to realize how dehydrated you are. So it's like you start to show signs of like, oh, if your cheeks are getting rosy, or you start to like show signs of like um
Yeah.
frostbite, or like your skin's getting really red, like you need to drink water like right away, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned that because my very early time at Driveline, I had an athlete who he's from Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada originally, and he was going to college in Southern Oklahoma. Southern Oklahoma in the summertime, hot and humid.
Yeah.
And he was telling me like I want to do the same like warm up routine with the med balls and everything, but I feel like I'm just getting exhausted quickly. I'm like, yeah, yeah, no shit, buddy. Like you're in 105-degree weather and it's hot and humid, you're wearing yourself quickly. And he asked me, like, what can I do to do that? And I just said, hey, listen, just do one set because your body's already warm, just being outside.
Yeah.
Having one set, yes, you'll get the proper warm up in, but you're also going to save your bullets. You're going to save your energy to the stuff that really matters, keeping the main thing, and that's executing a bullpen or executing your live outing or executing your throwing plan for the day. So it's funny how all these things correlate more than anything.
absolutely.
It definitely does, guys. It definitely does. Well, about to run short on time here. If you guys want to kind of plug your socials or have any last words before we and wrap it up here, feel free to, hammer it away, guys.
Go ahead, SJ.
Uh, I'll let you go first. I'll let you have that honor.
No, it's been an absolute pleasure getting to talk with you guys and like have just really high quality conversations. I know that there's probably more things that
Oh, we could go on
eventually
for
like you
hours.
talk about. Oh, we could go on for hours, and like things that you probably like
Yeah.
that I'd be like, I'm not sure. But like at the end of the day, I think that's the beauty of coaching is like you can see there's not like SJ, like when we talked, like what was one of the things I said to you was like there's probably not a lot of like right ways to do something, just a lot of really bad ways to do stuff. And I think
Yeah,
that's the art and the beauty of coaching. So it's been a
Second
pleasure,
best.
but
it really is.
yeah.
No,
So
yeah, it's been an
um
absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
yeah. So you guys, anybody who's watching wants to see anything I post, follow me on TikTok or Twitter at Pilla307 or Instagram at CoachPilla_24. So that's all I got.
Love it. Love it.
No, yeah, that on what Gabe said, it's been an absolute pleasure. I mean, frick, having two different minds, two different ways of thinking, along with my own, having this great conversation, like, oh, it's been awesome. And yeah, follow me on Twitter at SJ Mousseau. Uh, I have two Instagram accounts, so you'll likely find them. I mean, if you learn how to spell my last name right, you should be able to find them at that point. It's
Yeah.
just
In the
SJ
show
Mousseau
notes, guys,
or
just copy and paste.
Musto Baseball. Musso Baseball. Yeah, feel free. Feel free. I would love to have a conversation with anybody out there personally. So
Awesome.
we
Awesome.
should
Well,
definitely
appreciate
we
you
should
guys.
definitely continue this.
Oh, we can. We definitely can. Absolutely. And yeah, appreciate you guys for taking the time out of your days coming on here and talking some shop. And if you guys have
Of
any
course.
questions for them, feel free to hit them up, hit them in the DMs, emails. I'll put all that in the show notes for you guys. But um, for those of you listening, appreciate you tuning in again and stay in the zone.